Welcome to Food Revolution Conversations, where we explore healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for all.
I am Ocean Robbins, your host, and I am so excited for this conversation with Dr. Terry Mason. We're going to be looking at food and health and also we're going to be looking at the inequities of health opportunity and access in our world today, and more importantly, what we can do about it so we can have healthy, ethical, and sustainable food for all. Dr. Terry Mason is a retired urologist and public health official who champions holistic approaches to health management. He serves as the CEO of Treevention Incorporated. That's Treevention, like treatment and prevention. It seeks to combine treatment and prevention and to reduce the burden of chronic disease through education and empowerment. Dr. Mason has been responsible for leading public health programs and services for one of the nation's largest metropolitan health departments. He shares his holistic approach to health as an internationally recognized health educator and an inspirational speaker, and also on his popular radio show, which is on WVON 1690 AM. It's called The Doctor in the House. He's been doing it for more than 21 years. And he is a champion of helping bring health education and nutritional awareness and opportunity and access into all of the communities that need it the most. Terry, thanks so much for being here with us today.
You are so welcome, and I'm grateful to be here.
So you practiced urology for more than a quarter century in Chicago. And for most of that time, I gather you were someone who literally ate a steak a day.
That is correct.
True? Okay, but something happened through your own practice of urology that shifted your eating habits. Can you tell us about how that unfolded?
Well, what I was, as you properly noted, I ate a steak a day. I loved porterhouse and T-bone, and I'd have my butcher cut them and individually wrap them. So I had one for every day. And obviously the stresses of a residency, and I was hypertensive already. What happened was I was on a treadmill working, trying to work out, ended up with chest pain, called my cardiologist from the treadmill and met him at the hospital. Next thing I knew, I was on a cardiac cath table, and he had discovered a significant blockage in a major artery. And while he had the catheter in my artery, in my heart, I was telling, and he was going to do a balloon angioplasty. I was trying to negotiate with him to let me come off of the table, and I would go out to Sausalito, California, where Dean Ornish had his program. I had been out to see Dean before, and I said, look, I'd really like to do this instead of that. He says, no, I got you on the table. I can't let you get off this table and get on a plane, not knowing what might happen. So that ended that conversation. I ended up with the stent.
Yeah.
So then he said, but you're going to have to take this drug for the rest of your life, this statin. And I said, no, I'm not going to take it. And he said, why? I said, because I know what that does to your muscle tissue. I'm not going to take that that medication. And I said, but here's what I will do. I will promise you that I won't put anything in my mouth that contains any cholesterol or bad saturated fat. And I will come to your office every month for you to verify that with a lab test. And that's what happened.
Wow.
And what
happened then? What happened to the lab test? What happened to your heart?
Well, I'm still doing fine. I haven't had any, I get checkups from time to time. Everything is fine. My cholesterol, and I'm still doing my cholesterols because I promised them I would. And they're always very, very low. And I haven't had any animal or dairy products since that time. And that's been, oh my God, that's been over maybe 15 years ago or more.
So you've had a very direct personal experience with the power of food to really, in your case, literally be medicine.
Absolutely.
And get without all the side effects, right?
I don't like to say the food as medicine.
Okay.
Because if we eat the right food, we would never need the medicine.
Yeah.
So the food is really a self-correcting agent that is the only thing that we have that actually works on the cause of our problem and not just manages a complication.
Yeah, absolutely. The CDC recently came out with a report telling us that in the first half of 2020, life expectancy in the US dropped by a year overall. But among the Black population, it actually dropped quite a bit more than that, by 2.7 years. In fact, it just in 1 year, it fell down to 72 years, 77.8 for the population overall. So there's a almost 6-year gap in life expectancy along race lines right there. And everyone, of course, struggling, but Black people a lot more. We know that Black Americans are hospitalized with COVID-19 at about 2.9 times the rate of white Americans and die at about 1.9 times the rate. The CDC is saying that the primary reason for the drop in life expectancy is indeed COVID-19 related. But it's not impacting everybody equally. So from your perspective, what are the core causes of this inequality?
Sure. But the health outcomes have always been disparate. The economic outcomes have been disparate.
Yeah.
The opportunities for professional placement are disparate. I did a lot of work in the areas of disparities, and I had a slide at the beginning of my presentation that asked the question, why do racial disparities exist? And then in nice, big, bold letters, because they're supposed to. And people would ask, well, why do you say that? I said, well, you don't need to do more than a cursory review of the history of America to understand that we were different and we were disparate from the beginning of our association with the people who are the arbiters of slavery and everything else. So why would you expect there to be a difference? I did some conversations around what we were fed as we were people that had to work these fields. And many of us developed things like beriberi and scurvy and things of that nature because we were just given cornmeal and bacon. And when you saw the lynchings and all the other things, there is not just of African Americans, but what happened to the indigenous people here who were actually taken off their land by force, killed, murdered, massacred, you name it. So these disparities exist because of the history of this country and the way that people have been treated, not just in the last 10 or 15 years, but over 400 years.
Yeah. So it's not by accident, it's functionally by design that we have the enormous disparity in opportunity and resource and access and in health outcome that so often plays out along lines of race. At the same time, there are some of us who would like to change that with whatever resources we have, whatever opportunities we have. And you've obviously dedicated a lot of your life to trying to uplift health and opportunity and knowledge in communities that need that. Not that we don't all need that, but you're focusing in Chicago and in urban communities that have been the most struggling in many cases. For those of our members, whatever their skin color, whatever their class background, who want to be a part of the solution, who want to be a part of what Dr. King referred to when he said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. For those of us who want to help it bend a little faster, when you look at the health disparity in America today, what do you think we could advocate for at a policy level or invest in as individuals that might make a bit of a difference?
Well, it's a great question. And it's a multi-layered question, as you can obviously imagine. One of the things that I would say is that as Americans, we ought to be lobbying our government not to be complicit in the leading causes of death by allowing the food manufacturers and other people to continue to promulgate using all manner of technology and the opportunities that advertising gives them and the subsidies that we provide for certain foodstuffs that we know are not helpful. We need to be advocating for those to be changed. We need to be advocating for it not to be more expensive to to buy organic food, for example. We need to be subsidizing the food that's better for us than making cheaper the food that is worse for us. Because in poorer communities, these are the foodstuffs that people are going to be eating. We need to be certain that we allow the science that we know to speak, not to be censored when it comes to simple things like the International Agency for Research on Cancer. We know that these particular things like hot dogs, as they mention, or 4 pieces of bacon, as they mention, are group 1 carcinogens that increase the risk of colorectal cancer for everybody, not just for Black people, but for everybody by 18%.
Yeah.
So there are a number of things that we need to know and we need to do, and we could do those things. We need to stop the subsidy that drives the prices of the foods so low, but the products are so bad, and we've got so much antibiotics and so many hormones and different things in our meat supply. And we are feeding probably better grains to our livestock than we're getting to make into the artificially created cereals that we eat so much. Added that we add this elixir of insulin growth factor 1 that we call milk to that mix. There's a great paper that was written that we came out in about 2010, done by Mari Gallagher. She coined the term food deserts in that paper. She looked at the relative distances for good food stores that sold good food relative to where people lived. And she did a very nice computation that showed that the further those things were away, the more likely people were to suffer from bad health outcomes. And so what we've got to do is we've got to make health a priority. I don't know if you'll get to this question, but one of the reasons that I left the practice of medicine, I had a very booming practice, but it came to me one day that what was I doing? Mm-hmm. I had been taught to be an arbiter of a co-conspirator, if you will, with the pharmaceutical and device manufacturers.
Yeah.
And what I was really taught, and what we were taught as physicians, that we didn't cure anything. And we really just managed diseases. And what we really did, we didn't really manage the diseases, we just managed the complication that the disease caused. Because the disease was really the food. So we never told people to change that other than very perfunctory. And what she coined was the term that a lot of people began to use called food deserts. So we did at the American Public Health Association, we took it one step further. And it wasn't just that these foods were not available, but it looked as though that after a certain period of time, perhaps one generation, where people were not familiar with eating the foods I grew up eating. I'm one of 10 kids. And my mom, we didn't have much, but she always had a great big old pot of beans on the stove. We had lots of beans, we had lots of rice, and we only had meat very rarely, maybe on the weekend.
Yeah.
And what happened was, as I come to the end close of this thing that I'm trying to say here, is that when people have been bereft of the real good foods they should eat long enough, and it looks like it's about a generation, they lose their taste for the better foods. And they won't, even if the stores are sometimes there, no one will know how to cook it. No one will know how to prepare it. And so this is what's happening, not just in Black America, but in America in general.
Yes. So there are so many levels at which we can tackle this problem. And I sometimes think that we need a biodiversity of solutions, because you never know quite what's going to work. And the truth is, it takes all of it. So I'm hearing you saying that we need to address the subsidies. which, tens of billions of dollars a year, if for those who don't know, in federal taxpayer money are going to subsidize commodities crops, which is bringing down the price of factory farmed meat, high fructose corn syrup, Wonder Bread, all sorts of junk foods. And none of that money is reaching fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, the very foods we should all be eating more of, according to tens of thousands of studies published in peer-reviewed medical journals. I'm also hearing you say we need to increase, to address the food desert issue. And part of how we can do that is through education and through sharing culinary wisdom that's culturally appropriate, I would add, in all of the communities that exist. So for everybody who thinks that when you're just cooking something good in the kitchen that's healthy, that's just a selfish thing. No, you're actually preserving a cultural tradition, and hopefully you'll share it with other people, because the best doorway, they say, to a man's mind is his stomach, right? So if you want to influence people, sometimes feeding them good food can be powerful work. Another thing I think we can do if we want to address the food desert issue, as well as education, is economic empowerment through, of course, resources in communities that need it. We've got to stop the redlining and a lot of the other historical practices that have unfairly discriminated against certain communities and people. But we can also double the value of the SNAP program for fruits and vegetables. There's a experiment being done around this, led by an organization called Wholesome Wave. And what they're doing is, it's called the Double Up Bucks program. There's 500,000 Americans right now that get double value for fruits and vegetables in almost every state. They're testing it out, and what they're finding is that when that happens, people buy more fruits and vegetables, demand for fruits and vegetables increases in their community, they eat more fruits and vegetables, and they're healthier because of it. So to me, this is, if we're gonna subsidize anything, we should be subsidizing healthy food in the communities that need it the most, rather than subsidizing the junk food industry.
Yes, that was my entire point. And we were part of the Double Bucks program when I was at the county. We actually had RX bags, prescription bags. And our primary care doctors, one of the doctors, Dr. Jafunza Carter, was also vegan. And she helped to devise bags that had certain sort of vegetables that were better for people, may have some kidney failure, people that had high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol, different things. And then she went over those so that people walked out with a prescription that was in food, and also with a methodology to cook it that would not reverse the good things that the food would do, but would be able to accommodate the cultural tastes that people had in a way that would not make them ill. So it is, you're right. And then the hospital system itself poured more money into the Double Bucks program to extend it so that more people could get the Double Bucks. But you're absolutely right. These are the things that could be done. We can make good food cheap and widely available in America. And that's what we ought to do. But at the same time, we're going to have to stop the programming. And the programming that makes people go buy these foods that are not good for us. And the fact that nowadays, if you've got a 50-inch television set in your bedroom and you happen to wake up in the morning, you could see a 50-inch burger. And so we've got to start thinking about that. And lastly, we have got to make sure that we do what we can to make sure that the good foods also taste good, so that we could begin to reprogram the taste buds of our youth.
Yes, good call.
In a positive way.
Good call. I want to talk COVID for a second.
Sure.
A CDC report analyzed more than 1.7 million US cases and 103,000 deaths. They concluded that people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease and diabetes were hospitalized 6 times as often and died 12 times as often as those without those underlying conditions. Terry, do you think that comorbidities and overall health status have a major impact on COVID-19 outcome, and that we should be putting more attention there as a society if we want to stop COVID-19?
Yes, I'm actually doing a talk this weekend at a church to talk about an acronym that I call FARM, F-A-R-M, for looking at how we mitigate some of these issues with regard to COVID-19. And basically the whole thing is around what we need to do is to do the things that help our bodies fight this and to make our bodies less of a victim to the ravages of the coronavirus. And what that means is we have to, the foods that we're eating, and this is the thing that is difficult and what I'm trying to get people to understand, that it's the food. It's the food that is inflammatory. And we want to call it heart disease and this and that. But what we have is system-wide vascular inflammation caused by these foods that we eat, these processed foods, these foods that are fried, these foods that have the milks and the creams and the butters. And these are the things that are causing this inflammation, not a lot at one time, but a little bit all the time. And eventually, just as if you scrape your knee once, if you give it time, it will heal. But if 3 hours later or 4 hours later, you scrape it again, and then 4 hours after that, you scrape it again, it never heals. And that's what we do. We've been programmed to think we need to eat far more than we need to eat. We've made bad things that are very inflammatory, easy for us to have access to. And we have misguided the information as to what causes these diseases. So everybody thinks, many people think that diabetes is caused by too much sugar, when in fact it isn't the sugar at all. It's a saturated fat that kills these beta cells in the pancreas. So we really do need an education program that speaks the language that people understand. And I know our commercial industries know how to do this. The other thing is that we've got to have people stop believing they need to eat more. We're eating almost 75 pounds more meat per person now than we did in 1950. And yet the human being has not changed in terms of who we are and what we are in that same period of time, except that we've grown wider, not necessarily taller.
Yes, we have grown wider. Obesity rates are now approaching 40% in America. More than 2/3 of our population is overweight. We have, I think, the dubious distinction of having the fattest population on the planet right now. I think we've passed Mexico again on obesity rate. Of course, this is all fueling disease. It's not just an aesthetic thing. It's that's not even the core issue. The core issue is that that's a marker for higher risk for cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes and so many other issues. Terry,
I just want to add one thing about that before.
Yeah, sure.
If you might. One of the things I do is language is so important. Okay, so when I talk to people, I said, look, guys, if you have vascular disease anywhere, you have it everywhere. So this whole notion that you just got some blockages in the blood vessels of your heart is wrong. If they're in your heart, they're in your legs, they're in your stomach, they're everywhere. And they're causing, and if you got damage to these inside lining cells, these endothelial cells, anywhere in the body, you have them everywhere. It was that, and I learned that while I was in practice treating erectile dysfunction. And there's a journal article published in JAMA, I think 2009, that actually correlates the clinical onset of certain diseases with erectile dysfunction. And they found that men who complained of erectile dysfunction, they went on to have heart attacks, strokes. Why? Because it's all the same disease. So what we have to do, what you and I have to do, is we have to change this language because it confuses people. And we need to talk about how ubiquitous these diseases are everywhere. So when you get a blood clot or you get a blockage of blood flow in your leg, that's not different than the blood flow to the heart, or that's not different than the blood flow to the brain. It's the same process caused by the same thing. We don't need different solutions. We need the only real solution that we have, and that is to reverse these things by eating just the opposite of the foods that cause them.
Yes, well, here to that. You were one of the authors of a study conducted by researchers at Rush University, and the study was looking at vascular health, and it tracked, I believe, 44 African Americans. Some of them
Yes.
were
Yes.
given a plant-based diet for 5 weeks. Can you tell us what happened in the study and what did we learn from it?
Well, Dr. Kim Williams, who is the professor and chair of cardiology at Rush University Hospital and the past president of the American College of Cardiology, who's always been he's very community focused. And I said, I'd really like to think about how we could begin to prove that Black people can improve. We always hear about how bad we are, but we never talk about how we improve. So we designed a small study. Actually, because of funding, it was small. We're actually now in the process of trying to get more money to do a much bigger study. So we could only take about 50 people. And our church has well over 5,000 people that attended. And just before I got the announcement out for the first service, we had 200 people in the room wanting to sign up. And what we did was we contracted with a company so we could make sure everybody had an isocaloric. They were all eating the same thing. And we asked the people that if you cheat, just write it down. Just write down what it was you ate. And we did a bunch of biometrics before and after.
And they were getting food deliveries for the people.
These are food. They were getting.
They were supposed to just eat what they got delivered to them.
They're supposed to eat what they got delivered to. Only do that. But we told them, if you cheat, just write it down.
Yeah.
And people were very compliant. And we also did a bunch of biometric measurements. We measured particularly inflammatory markers. And as you may know, trimethylamine oxide is one of the most, well, it does a lot of damage. And it's now been implicated in cancer and everything else. And what we did is we had a lab that we sent the blood for the pre and the post TMAOs, as well as the lipoproteins, and we assessed cardiac risk and all these things. And what we found, and insulin levels and everything else, but was the most startling thing is that the TMAO dropped 41% in 5 weeks. In 5 weeks, just on a dietary change.
Wow.
41%. There's no medicine out there that can do that. And it was, and the other markers dropped too. The low density lipoproteins, so C-reactive protein, all of these things, and I can send you the poster that we put together on it. And our plan is, what we'd like to do is we'd like to get 200 people to do this, because we need more power in the larger numbers. Yeah. But it just goes to show you, and people were just astonished. And my motivation was to show that, because we never saw information like this on African-American populations. We always see the bad stuff. And here's something that shows that, hey, good things can happen when we do this. And when we change what we eat, we can change our internal biochemistry, which then changes our life and gives us a new lease that we didn't know existed before. And here is not our opinion. I always say, in God we trust, all others must have data. So this was the data. And right now we're in the process of trying to recruit some other folks to help make that money. It looks like it's going to take us to do the size study we want to do with the crossover and everything else, about $1.5 million to do this study. And we should, I just spoke to one of our senators. I'm like, guys, you got to shake some money loose from someplace, because what we're telling you is you don't know how much we could save in pharmaceuticals, hospitalizations, surgeries, and what have you, if we began to get this message out. Now, some of your donors may not like it, because we're going to be talking about the causes of this. I can't, for the rest of my life, I cannot be engaged in just prescribing pills. That's why I quit.
Yeah.
I have to give people what they need to reverse the disease.
How much do you think we might be able to save if we truly made food the foundation of health in the United States? I
would say, if we got really serious about it, not all at once, But I think that we could comfortably save, we're spending about $3 trillion now. We should be able to cut that in half. And we're spending $3 trillion. There's a great cartoon. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a picture of a sink, and the sink is stopped up and the water's running, and the water's running over the sink. And you got a bunch of guys in a room with mops trying to mop up the water. But nobody goes over to turn the water off on the sink or to pull the stopper out. And I'm saying that we're spending $3 trillion on basically mopping efforts, where if we really wanted to get serious about this, we could spend less than half of that if we just pull the sink stopper out and turn the disease off. And how do we do that? We do that with using the power of our advertising machine to start getting people to eat the right things.
Yeah. It's pretty stunning if you think about it, that we could save, according to that estimate, $1.5 trillion per year. That means in about 14 years, we could eliminate repay the entire national debt. That means, we could create kind of utopia, with those savings. 19% of gross domestic product in the United States, maybe more, goes to medical care or disease symptom management. And yet people say we can't afford healthy food. Well, individuals can't when the subsidies are stacked against them and when the whole economic system is stacked against them. Mm-hmm. But if we were serious about valuing health and human welfare, we could make so many good things happen.
Not only that, but do you know what we do to the environment? Because now we wouldn't be killing all these animals. We wouldn't need to grow all these animals. We would be able to stop the methane that's coming from these animals that are contributing to greenhouse gases. More greenhouse gases come from that than from all of the transportation with cars, planes, boats, trucks combined.
Yeah.
So we could literally clean our air in a generation.
Yeah. Yep, more than 80% of the Earth's agricultural land surface is being used for animal agriculture, for 17% of our calories. So yeah, tremendous savings possible there. I want to turn to another kind of more specific topic, which is lactose intolerance. It affects 65% of humanity, the vast majority of whom are people of color. And yet milk is advertised as nature's most perfect food. Of course, it is for a baby calf, but not necessarily for humans. Do you think, though, that our milk and dairy obsession are in any way functionally an expression of racism?
Well, that's a great question. And the fact that there are some people that are not Black that are also lactose intolerant, but far fewer. I happen to be a lactose intolerant person. And I didn't even know what it was, and my parents didn't know what it was. I just knew I couldn't. Whenever I tried to eat certain things, I would end up in the bathroom. So I think that the fact that we're not being aggressive to do something about it is racist. Because and the fact that I have to commend guys like Neil Barnard. We went to the AMA a year or two ago where they were trying to say that lactose intolerance was a disease. And we said, no, it's not a disease. There's nothing wrong with people who are lactose intolerant other than they rightfully do not have the enzyme to break down milk that does not come from their mother, from a human mother. And there is no need for milk past the time a woman or a cow lactates for the appropriate youth or young animal or person that person is responsible for feeding. We talk a lot about that cow milk is the absolute perfect milk for baby cows. And human milk is the because we had a huge breastfeeding campaign in the Department of Public Health that we championed. And we had marches and we had parades and we had everything to celebrate women who choose to breastfeed and to give them the support that they need to do that and to create spaces in all of the businesses. We called the rooms the Milky Way rooms. So a woman could go and breastfeed her child or pump her breasts to get the milk that her child needs. And we need to make that a national law and make it far more comfortable for women to breastfeed.
Yes, here on that one. Humans are the only species on Earth that drinks milk past infancy, though, and we're also the only species on Earth that drinks the milk of another species. So, although it's been consumption of milk from other bovine lactating mammals has been normalized in our society, it is, from an evolutionary perspective, perhaps a little bit odd.
We know that this milk consumption is dangerous for us. We know that it does things that we don't need to have done. We know that milk consumption leads to osteoporosis. It leads to a number of other diseases, and the insulin growth factor 1 that's in the milk has been implicated in the acceleration of growth, not just of normal cells, but cancer cells. And we are cautioning people now, breast cancer, all people with cancers, that this is something they need to be careful about.
Yes. There was a recent poll which found that 3% of Americans identified as vegans. 8% of Black Americans, however, identified as vegans. Another poll found that 31% of people of color in the US say they're eating less meat intentionally, compared to 19% of white respondents who said they were eating less meat intentionally. Can you shed any light on why you think it is that so many Black people and people of color in the US are moving away from animal products at a dramatically higher rate than white folks are? Any sense of the cultural elements of that, or what's making that happen?
I think it's a number of things. We're seeing more of some of the celebrities who are vegan. I mean, I was with one of the basketball players who is a vegan and talks about it. We see more of these iconic people who are openly vegetarian or vegan. We're hearing more about this than we used to hear. We're seeing look at the movies that have come out, everything from Forks Over Knives to Diet Fiction to Game Changers to all of these things that have helped to change the psyche. And Game Changers especially because men were probably the most confused around what being a plant-based person will do or not do. But when you look at a guy like Rich Roll, who is an ultra athlete who does these amazing athletic feats, or the strongest man in the world who is lifting untold numbers of amounts of pounds of weight over almost under a ton, just under a ton, you can't argue with it anymore. And what I think these things have done, and I'm just grateful to all those people that produced these films for us, because some people get things in different sorts of ways and certain kinds of genre are better than others. But I'm just so happy to see this because I've been able to see this transformation in a very short period of time. And it's not, people think that because you're vegetarian, there's nothing to eat because we eat so much meat that's all they know. So this is good, Ocean. This is good. And for things like what you guys do, you know, the publications that you put out, the thing on the whole stomach situation with what's happening in our stomachs and
yes,
the brains and the intestines and everything else that you just wrote about. I just thank God for what you guys do and to make this information so easily available in language that people can understand is absolutely amazing. And I thank you for it.
Well, thank you so much, Terry. And I thank God for the work that you do. You know, in a sense, you retired from medical practice because you didn't want to push drugs and surgery and you wanted to advocate for health. But your work as a healer was just beginning. I understand that you and others acquired farmland that you're using to grow food for distribution in underserved neighborhoods in Chicago. I also understand you're employing folks recently released from prison who serve time for nonviolent offenses. Can you tell us about this project, what you're aiming to achieve, and how it's going? First
of all, thank you for asking. It was a outgrowth of a project led by a pastor by the name of Dr. Gerald January from a church called the Church of God. And it is a thing that started out as a small garden of one of its parishioners. Mother Carr is what they called her. They've subsequently moved from the old church to a new site that's 76 acres of land that the church acquired. They were going to build a much bigger sort of commercial park with things like Starbucks and all that sort of stuff. But for a number of reasons, that didn't happen. So they decided to use a little bit more of the land for what was called Mother Carr's farm. And we went from just maybe an acre or so. Over the last year, we doubled the space that we had because it got up to like 9, and now we're almost at 18 acres. Last year, for the first time, we actually grew watermelons. We had about 300 watermelons that we grew, both red and yellow meat watermelons, in addition to our kale, our Swiss chard, our radishes, our onions. We have our own bees. We had almost 20 gallons of organic clover honey. Our entire farm we have a wonderful farm manager. His name is Mr. Anthony Williamson, who has done all of this without using any pesticides, no chemicals of any sort, because of the richness of this soil that this church bought, which was an old farm. And the nutrients were still there. And Tony, we're in the process now of putting manure and other things in to sort of replenish some of those nutrients. But our plan is to get this up. We want to double it again. And we'd like to eventually, within a year, hopefully get up to half of the capacity that we have. It's the young men that we've brought out that we call returning citizens. It has made such a difference in their life. And we're actually now trying to figure out how we might be able to get some temporary trailers with some solar powers to provide them some place to live while they're there. And we also bring in some of the troubled teens from some of the schools in the southern suburbs that have had some brushes with authority and brought them out. And in fact, none of these folks had ever even seen a farm or even been involved with picking food. And one of the things that we've done now is we're trying to get more of the businesses, because how great is it? We sell shares in this. So a full share is $450 for the growing season. That allows you to get a box that was usually somewhere, without the watermelon, somewhere around 12 to 18 pounds of fresh vegetables. And what that does is that those vegetables are picked on Friday and they're picked up on Saturday. So they never see a refrigerator. It is put in just take it out and we put a little water on it and just a little ice, and people come up the next day and pick it up.
And that's a box per week throughout the growing season?
That's a box every other week.
Yeah.
And whatever we have, and that includes honey, that includes whatever is there, is picked and it's picked up. Our plan is to try to raise money to buy more farm equipment to make it a bit more efficient, as well as to create a place where we can do some degree of post-processing, because we have now a demand from the restaurants. We took some of the food to a few of the restaurants, and it's amazing. They would pick some of this stuff on Friday, and on Friday evening, these vegetables would be on the plates of people in these restaurants, and they didn't understand, why did this taste so different? And it tasted so different because it had never been stored in a refrigerated place. It had never been that. And so that one buyer went from just testing it out to buying over 350 pounds of kale from us every week. So
Wow.
we're really trying to expand both our commercial business, but we also want to reach out to our seniors. We're trying to create a delivery service so that they don't have to drive. It's a bit of a drive to come out to the farm. We're working with some people to create some drop-off points. And we're also working to get more farm implements and to be able to bring in higher, because we want to pay these young people a livable wage. We want them not to have to sleep out in a trailer, but we want them to have enough money to be able to rent a small apartment and to feed themselves. And so that's the other part of what we're trying to do. And we just task people. We even started a GoFundMe page. It's right on Mother Carr's farm. It's a labor of love, man. It's a labor of love.
Well, it's a labor of love. And I'm thinking about the ripples this sends out. When I think about those 350 pounds of kale, when I think about all those CSAs, every single box that you're delivering equals less heart attacks, less people living in misery, less kids losing their parents too young. Every box you're delivering also represents more people employed who otherwise might have been on the streets doing who knows what. It means more human dignity restored. And it also means more regeneration of our soils. Land that might have been fallow is now growing food, which when well managed can sequester carbon, can become a piece of the solution on planet Earth. So it's like everywhere you look, you see these ripples of goodness and health and wellness flowing from this one simple act. So if people want to get involved or contribute at the GoFundMe page, what do they Google to find it?
Let's go to Vernon Park Church of God.
Vernon Park Church of God, okay.
Vernon Park Church of God, and everything is right there. They can see pictures of the farm. We're actually we didn't have money this year, but we wanted to try and get a little movie so that we could put it up on the website. So there's Vernon Park Church of God. The GoFundMe is right there too. So that we're trying to raise our money for our tractor, so that Tony and the guys can do their work far more efficiently than they're doing it now. We will be going back down to Champaign-Urbana because that's where we do our starter plants. And our goal over the next year or two is to raise enough money to put on our own little greenhouse so we could still do all our starter plants here rather than have to drive and cart them all the way back from Champaign.
Beautiful. So for everybody watching, right down below, there's a transcript, and we'll make sure to include a link so you can go right there and learn more. Pitch in if you can. Terry, it's been such a privilege talking with you and sharing this time. I'm so grateful that your waiting room essentially expanded to include all of humanity and the whole planet. We're all grateful for what you're doing. Thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your courage. And thank you for walking the talk. Who knew that when you were healing your own heart and your own cardiovascular system years ago, you would be having epiphanies that would change fundamentally everything you do in your life. And now you'd be helping so many other people.
Well, I don't want to thank you, Ocean, for what you and your publications and your conferences, it's just wonderful. And I'm so grateful. You're the reason why we have more people that are eating vegan. You're the reason, and the people that you bring on and the programs that you produce, those are the reasons why we have more people who are choosing to have life, and they'll have it more abundantly by eating the things that we were designed to eat. And I thank you for it.
Well, I thank you. We've been talking with Dr. Terry Mason, and thank you so much, everyone watching, for your time, for your attention, and for your participation with us in this food revolution.